The United Kingdom is bracing for the steepest economic blow among major world economies as the Iran conflict continues to devastate global markets. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has dramatically downgraded growth forecasts for the world's biggest economies, with Britain facing the most severe impact from the ongoing U.S.-Israel war with Iran. The OECD's latest assessment paints a grim picture as energy prices soar and supply chains face unprecedented disruption across multiple sectors. Financial analysts warn that the conflict's ripple effects are creating a perfect storm of inflation, reduced consumer spending, and business uncertainty that could push the UK into its deepest recession in decades. While other major economies, including Germany, France, and Japan, also face significant downward revisions to their growth projections, Britain's heavy reliance on Middle Eastern energy imports and its complex trade relationships make it uniquely vulnerable. The downgrade comes as businesses across the UK are already reporting severe impacts from rising operational costs and supply chain bottlenecks. Economic recovery timelines remain uncertain as the conflict shows no signs of immediate resolution. Devastating new footage reveals the extensive damage across multiple Israeli cities following the latest wave of Iranian attacks in this escalating regional conflict. Video evidence obtained by Al Jazeera shows widespread destruction to civilian infrastructure, residential buildings, and commercial districts in several major urban centers throughout Israel. The attacks represent a significant escalation in the ongoing confrontation between Iran and the U.S.-Israel alliance, with Iranian forces demonstrating their capacity to strike deep into Israeli territory. Emergency response teams are working around the clock to assess casualties and restore critical services as residents survey the wreckage of what were thriving neighborhoods just hours earlier. The strikes targeted both military installations and civilian areas, marking a concerning expansion in the scope and intensity of Iranian military operations. International observers are calling these attacks among the most severe direct Iranian strikes on Israeli soil since the conflict began, raising fears of further retaliation and regional destabilization. The damage assessment is ongoing as Israeli Defense Forces prepare their response to what officials are calling an unprecedented act of aggression. Southeast Asian nations are accelerating their nuclear energy programs as the Iran war creates severe disruptions to traditional energy supply chains across the region. Energy analysts report that the ongoing Middle East conflict has added unprecedented momentum to nuclear development projects from Thailand to Indonesia, with governments fast-tracking previously stalled initiatives. The energy crisis sparked by the Iran conflict has exposed the region's dangerous over-reliance on volatile fossil fuel imports, forcing policymakers to reconsider nuclear power as a strategic necessity rather than a long-term option. Countries including Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia are now actively pursuing nuclear technology partnerships with established nuclear powers to reduce their dependence on Middle Eastern energy sources. Regional energy security has become a top priority as oil and gas prices continue their dramatic surge, making nuclear power increasingly attractive from both economic and strategic perspectives. The shift represents a fundamental transformation in Southeast Asia's energy landscape, with several nations announcing ambitious timelines for their first nuclear facilities. This nuclear pivot could reshape the region's energy independence for decades, while providing a more stable alternative to increasingly unreliable fossil fuel markets. A landmark legal verdict against major social media platforms could fundamentally transform the digital landscape as we know it, according to technology experts analyzing this unprecedented court decision. The ruling represents what BBC technology editor Zoe Kleinman describes as a potentially game-changing moment for the entire social media industry, with implications that extend far beyond the courtroom. The addiction-focused verdict establishes legal precedent that could expose platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter to massive liability for deliberately designing addictive features that harm users' mental health and well-being. Legal analysts suggest this decision could trigger an avalanche of similar lawsuits across multiple jurisdictions, forcing social media companies to completely redesign their algorithms and user engagement strategies. The verdict specifically addresses how platforms manipulate dopamine responses and exploits psychological vulnerabilities to maximize user screen time and advertising revenue. Technology companies are already mobilizing legal teams to appeal the decision while simultaneously exploring how to restructure their platforms to comply with potential new regulations. The ruling could mark the beginning of the end for current social media business models, ushering in an era of unprecedented accountability and user protection measures. The prolonged Middle East conflict is fundamentally reshaping global aviation as major Gulf hub airports face an increasingly uncertain future in international air travel. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar's airports transformed long-distance flying by creating efficient connection points between Europe, Asia, and the Americas, making international travel more affordable and accessible than ever before. However, the ongoing Iran war is forcing airlines to reroute flights around conflict zones, dramatically increasing flight times, fuel costs, and operational complexity for carriers that built their business models around Middle Eastern hub strategies. Aviation experts warn that passengers should prepare for sustained turbulence in both flight availability and pricing as airlines struggle to maintain profitable routes while avoiding dangerous airspace. The conflict has already forced several major carriers to suspend or significantly reduce services through traditional Gulf corridors, creating bottlenecks and delays that ripple throughout the global aviation network. Insurance costs for Middle Eastern operations have skyrocketed, while passenger confidence in regional travel continues to decline sharply. The aviation industry now faces a fundamental restructuring that could permanently alter how people travel internationally, potentially reversing decades of progress in making global travel accessible and affordable.